Alright, we are going to look at the perimeter and area of shapes today. Our goal is to make sure that we know the difference between perimeter and area, and we know how to find the perimeter of a shape, and we know how to find the area of a shape. So, these two words you should have heard before, so I just started you with a couple of definitions. When we talk about perimeter, we're talking about the rim of the shape, meaning we're talking about the distance around the outside edge. So as you can see here, I've highlighted the perimeter of the two shapes that I've drawn. Area, however, is how much space this shape covers. And so area, you want to look at the green shaded in area on both of these shapes. Area is how much it covers. So perimeter would be like the fence around your backyard. The area would be the green grass covering your yard. Another way of thinking about it would be our classroom rug. We all sit around the perimeter for our morning meetings a lot of time. And then, of course, those are called area rugs because they cover an area of our floor in which we sit around the perimeter of our rug. So, perimeter and area are two words that you're expected to know how to find in math. And so we're going to jump right into that by looking at some graph paper. So, we're going to start with this shape. This would be a quadrilateral because it has four sides, and it would also be a square because, as we're going to find out in a minute, all four sides are congruent or equal. Now, what we care about here is we want to be able to find the perimeter of the shape. So we want to know how many units go around, units of measurement. And in this case, my graph paper is measured in centimeters. So these are centimeters squares. So I want to trace the perimeter of my shape first. Perimeter would be the distance around the outside. Now, if I want to know the perimeter of my shape, then I'm going to want to know how much it is to go all the way around the outside edges. So if I was to count, it would take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 to go down this side. But then I'm not finished. I still got to go down this side. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 down this side. Not finished. Still got to go around this side. Since this is a square, I shouldn't have to count all these. I should know that they're all 8 because it's a square. So, to find the perimeter, if I was going to walk the perimeter of this shape, I would have to walk 8, and then 8 more, and then 8 more, and then 8 more. So to find the perimeter, I would want to add all the sides. So if I were to add 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8, I would get, and you are allowed to use a calculator for this, 32 total centimeters. That means that it takes 32 centimeters to get all the way around the outside or the perimeter of this shape. Now, the next thing I want to be able to do is find the area. Area, of course, is how much this shape covers. Area is always talked about in square units. And so what that means is I want to know how many of these centimeter squares cover my shape. Now, of course, one way to do this is to count every single square. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. But we have a lot more things to do, and we don't want to have to count every single square. So what we do as 5th graders is we use a formula known as length times width. The area of my shape is length times width, L times W. What that means is I go and find an L side. So 1, 2. See how my 90-degree angle here forms my L. And I take the number length times the width. This is just like when you guys were doing multiplication arrays when you were younger. So length times width will tell me 8 times 8 will give me a total of 64 centimeters, and you're always going to see a little 2 here, meaning squared. That little exponent like we learned about the order of operations. That just means that these are square units. So if I wanted to pick back up where I was, I think it was at like, what, 20-something? I could keep counting and I would get all the way to 64 squares covering that shape. Now, let's try a different one. Let's look at this shape. Is this a square? No, that's a rectangle. Why is it a rectangle, not a square? Correct. All the sides are not congruent. So, first, I'm going to trace the perimeter of my shape. Perimeter goes all the way around the outside edge. Now, perimeter of this shape, I always want to do the same thing. I want to add all the sides. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 centimeters this way. Down this side, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 centimeters down that side. Alright, now since this is a rectangle, I shouldn't need to count the rest. I should know that 6 here means that there's also going to be 6 here. 4 here means there's going to be 4 here. So, how do we find the perimeter of this shape? Perimeter means that I have to do what? Hopefully you said add all the sides. So, 6 plus 4 plus 6 plus 4, I could put it into my calculator, and my answer would be 20. Perimeter is equal to 20 centimeters for this shape. 6 and 4 make 10, and another 6 and 4 is another 10. It's another way of thinking about it. Now, how about the area? Area is how many squares my shape covers. So again, because this is on graph paper, we could easily count how many squares it covers, or we could use our formula. Area equals length times width, or one side times the other, and area you'll find. So for this shape, it's 4 times 6, which is 24 centimeters squared. Remember, with area, you always see that little 2, because we're saying that that's how many square centimeters cover the area. I wanted to go back to this square that we started with, and there's one other shape that you're supposed to know how to find the perimeter and the area. Now, perimeter is always the same, even though we're going to look at this new shape. Look at this yellow shape here. What shape do we have? Correct if you said triangle, more correct if you said a right triangle, and even more correct if you said an isosceles right triangle, because it has 2 sides equal, since we know both of those sides are the same because this is part of a square. So, either way, we are looking at the perimeter and area of this triangle now. Now, for a triangle, you would still just add all the sides for perimeter. Perimeter is easy. It's always the same no matter what the shape is. Perimeter is always add all the sides. Now for a triangle, that means you're only adding 3 numbers. 1, 2, 3, because it only has 3 sides. Area, I like to call this thing a tricky triangle, because area of a triangle is still length times width. You still find the L. Okay, so we wouldn't use these 2 sides, we use these 2 sides. You still find the L of the triangle, and you do one side times the other. But the trick here is, if I did one side times the other, I'm going to lay it here where we were working earlier. If I did one side times the other, I would actually be telling you something I already told you. I'd be telling you 8 times 8 is 64, but this triangle does not cover all 64 of those squares. So what you want to think about here is how much of this triangle, how much of the square does the triangle cover? The triangle only covers what? Half. It only covers half of our square. So what's tricky about a triangle on area is that if you were trying to find the area of just this triangle, you would still do length times width. You'd still find the L, one side times the other. But with a tricky triangle, you have to remember to divide by 2, because the triangle is half the size. So we're cutting it in half. We're cutting the area in half and only including half of it for our triangle. So the other thing you're expected to do as a 5th grader and on up in school is to know that the area of a triangle is length times width, but you have to remember to divide by 2. It's what makes a triangle tricky. So if you always remember an area of a triangle is tricky, maybe it'll help to remember, oh, it's tricky because I have to divide by 2. It has that extra step. So The area of this triangle would be 8 times 8, which is 64, but then I have to divide by 2, and again, you have a calculator for this. 64 divided by 2 would be 32 centimeters squared. It would only cover half as many squares as the whole shape that we looked at earlier. The same is true for this rectangle. If I were to look at the triangle that only makes up half of it, I can find the perimeter of this triangle, one side plus another side plus another side. But what I'm interested in right now is the area. So I'm still going to do one side times the other, length times width, but I have to remember to divide by 2 if it is a triangle. So for this triangle, we would be doing 4 times 6, and then dividing by 2. And we already know 4 times 6 is 24 because that's what it was for the whole rectangle. But if I'm looking at just the triangle, I have to divide by 2, which gives me a total area of 12 centimeters squared. That means that if I were to draw this little line here, and I were to look at, let me draw it like that, just these squares, instead of all 24, I would probably only only end up with 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then you could probably put this and this together for 9, this and this for 10, this for 11, and this for 12. So, bottom line, you guys are expected to know how to find the perimeter and area of a couple of different shapes, and this is kind of where we can sum it up, is right here. Perimeter of a shape is the outside edges, and you just add all the sides. Area of a rectangle is just one side times the other. I like to highlight the L for area, length times width, and then one side times the other. Length times width. And then area of a triangle, it's a tricky triangle. You have to remember what makes it tricky. You have to remember that divide by 2. So I still find the L shape for area, and I do length times width. But I have to remember to divide by 2 because it's a tricky triangle, and we don't want to get tricked. So I hope now you have a better understanding of what perimeter and area is, and how to find the perimeter area of both of these types of shapes. And we will be practicing together soon.